Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Waterfront Beach Resort, a Hilton Hotel. My name is Jerry Wheeler. I'm the President and CEO of the Huntington Beach Chamber of Commerce. It's our pleasure today to host the City Attorney Candidate Forum for 2014. And on behalf of my Board of Directors, I want to welcome you all for taking time out of your very, very busy schedules to be here today. Without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and let you know that today we have two candidates for City Attorney. We have our incumbent, Jennifer McGrath, and we have the challenger this year, Mr. Michael Gates. And it's good to have them both here today. And again, I know we've got hot lights on, but we're going to try and make sure that this is a comfortable, relaxed situation. Each candidate today will have 5 minutes to make an introductory statement. We have a series of 4 questions. They will have 5 minutes each to answer that question. They may not need 5 minutes, but they have that as well. We have 4 scheduled questions. Should there be time enough at the end, we may be able to slip in an extra question if time allows.
I'm Jennifer McGrath, and I am proud to have been the City Attorney for the City of Huntington Beach for 12 years. I've worked for the city for 20, and I actually grew up here. So it's been quite a delight to be able to make a difference in my hometown. And now I'm raising my children. Unfortunately, they're teenagers right now, but that too shall pass. So, however, I am very pleased. I have a great deal of experience. I've had the opportunity in the City Attorney's Office to represent all of the different departments of the city, whether it's public safety, police and fire, code enforcement. More recently, I work more diligently with administration and human resources. But I do think that the record for my office speaks for itself. We have an annual report. All of them are available in the back, actually. And in 2011, my office was actually audited by an external firm to determine if there were cost savings or efficiencies that could be established by changes in my office. And I'm very happy to report, although of course, because they didn't audit, they did have recommendations, because you can't get paid if you don't find something wrong. But it actually determined that we were meaner and leaner than any other city attorney's office that was similarly sized. So although we did actively participate and cooperate with the audit against our will, worried what might happen, of course. I had been through one with my previous boss, the previous city attorney in 2000. Of course, that was ugly, but we were very pleased with the results. The following year, the city council decided they were going to try and identify cost savings by outsourcing my entire staff. I do currently have a staff of 11. Prior to 2008, I had a staff of 19. The workload hasn't changed, but we do just work meaner and leaner. And we've made some changes, like all of the departments. All of the departments have been working at half-mast since 2008. But in that respect, the outsourcing opportunity, which we did not actively cooperate with for obvious reasons, did not establish that there were any cost savings in going to outside counsel. The current litigation staff for the city attorney's office costs the city approximately $100 an hour, as opposed to what outside counsel would charge. In addition, my staff has no incentive to spend extra time to bill the city. They're going to be working on one case or another case, no matter what. We have 45 cases on an ongoing basis every year. We recently just won an excessive force case, which even our police chief said most cities would have actually settled because it was a fatality. But Neil Moore in the city attorney's office, who used to be our outside counsel for 25 years, defensed that case completely with a 12-0 jury. 8 weeks ago, we also had outside counsel, which we do hire for specific expertise. In this case, it was public works. It would not be cost effective for the city to have somebody that could specialize in public works construction, because the cases come up usually once every 4 years. We now have 2 pending, but that's an unusual circumstance. So we do use outside counsel for cost effectiveness, and they too delivered a 12-0 verdict in favor of the city, which was a $700,000 claim. So it's been a very nice month for the city attorney's office. In addition to that, I'm sure you've all heard that we won the Court of Appeal decision in the Senior Center. And whether you like the Senior Center or you don't like the Senior Center, my job is to defend the decisions of City Council, and in this case also the decisions of the voters. So I'm very pleased with the result because I've done my job, and I've done my job well. So I hope that you will vote for me and let me continue my job November 5th.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank everyone here who's in attendance for the debate. I think this is an important process for the city. I think it makes our city government better, both to have challengers and also to have people interested in knowing what's going on in city government. I also want to thank the Chamber for hosting today, and also the Waterfront Hilton for making this possible. This is an amazing setting and opportunity, so thank you. As Jerry said, and thank you, Jerry, for moderating as well. As Jerry said, my name is Michael Gates, and I'm running for city attorney. Just to give you a little bit of background, I've been in Huntington Beach my whole life, ever since I was 7 years old. I went to grade school here, junior high school, and graduated from Marina High School in 1993. I went on to Golden West College, and then went on to Pepperdine. I got a bachelor's in science of business administration and management. I graduated with the highest GPA in my graduating class before I went on to law school. In law school, I had some terrific experiences as well. I had some really amazing opportunities with internships and clerkships, one of which was back in 2006 when I was one of 3 students selected from over 5,000 applicants to work for the Department of Justice up in Los Angeles. I was involved there with prosecuting civil fraud cases, and I was actually engaged in the practice of law. I know my opponent's been telling people around town that that doesn't count, but according to the State Bar of California, it does, because when you're engaged in the practice of law under your own license or under the license of another attorney, that does count. I don't need that experience for this job, but it is a highlight in my career, and I appreciate that. I had similar experiences with the district attorney's office, working for a federal judge. I represented minors in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal, and did over 70 hours for the Pacific Justice Institute. Before I went to law school, I actually owned my own business. For 13 years before I went to law school, I worked in the computer software development industry. And for 10 of those 13 years, I was in a position of management. Another criticism that I've heard recently is that I have no management experience. And unfortunately, for I think my opponent, the records just doesn't support that. For 10 years, I have had management experience. I've been in charge of hiring, firing, performing performance reviews, involved in merit raises, involved in managing internal resources and external resources. Of those 13 years, 5 of those years was with my own business. I now have a second business. So in terms of managing internal resources and external resources, in terms of securing contracts, in terms of competing in the private sector, I have a whole wealth of experience that I'm very proud of, and I think will inure to the benefit of city attorney and managing the department there. After law school, I worked in medical malpractice for a couple of years, representing the good doctors and hospitals in the area, Orange County and LA area, before I went into general practice. And in general practice, I've had the good fortune of working for the County of Orange and the Orange County Sheriff's Department. I've worked for large-scale trucking companies. I've done premises liability, slip and falls, trip and falls, car accidents. I've done excessive force cases, this is all defense, by the way. Defended the Orange County Sheriff's Department against excessive force cases, negligence cases, false arrest cases, exactly the kind of law that's practiced in Huntington Beach defending the police department. In addition to that, I've practiced in negligence cases for the Sheriff's Department. I've practiced in flood cases, bad crosswalk cases, the list goes on and on for the county. So I am confident in my experience. I think, aside from some of the recent criticisms I've heard of my track record, I'm actually uniquely qualified to challenge the city attorney for this office, because I believe the experiences that I have and the training that I have, both in managing resources with my own companies in the private sector, is extremely valuable. So I think, plus, obviously representing public entities has been a huge help to challenge. So I think, I'm uniquely qualified. I believe that I'm ready for this job. I believe that I can make vast improvements to the city attorney's office. And so I want to thank you very much for the opening, and I guess we'll get to the first question.
Okay. We will begin with Jennifer. Will answer the first question first. Followed by Michael, and each person gets 5 minutes to answer the question. They don't need to take 5 minutes, but they have that 5 minutes if need be. First question, Jennifer. Describe the current tensions between local governments and the state of California, the legal options available to local governments, and your plan to help Huntington Beach through these issues.
It's an interesting question because there's always a challenge between local government and state government. The City of Huntington Beach is a charter city, which gives us much more latitude to regulate that which is a matter of citywide concern. And only when the state takes that opportunity to dictate statewide concern do we have a limitation, or are we, quote unquote, preempted. The best example I usually give during orientation is we can't change the speed limit on the highway when it goes through the City of Huntington Beach. Not on PCH, not on the 405. That's a matter of statewide concern, basically so people know that it's the same law as they go through the jurisdictions. Alternatively, if I want to change the speed limits on the arterials, that's a matter of citywide concern. So those things can be handled by the city at its level. Typically, we have, from the charter city perception, a difficult time getting changes through the state legislation. General law cities, which are the other half of the cities in the state of California, they have their legislature to represent them. As a charter city, we need the League of California Cities to represent us, or we need to actually get together to try and modify the law. The most current example of something that the state is taking on is the ban the bag. Whether you're in favor of it or not, the state's currently considering making a statewide law regarding the plastic bag issue. The city has already taken up that issue, and I'm sure most of you are aware it's been a contentious issue. If the state does adopt that law come September or October, then as of January 1st, the state will have declared that it's a matter of statewide concern. And with certain exemptions, including the City of Huntington Beach, no city will be able to regulate it separately. In addition to that, most recently, we've had the dissolution of redevelopment, obviously, causing a great significant impact in the City of Huntington Beach. And we are actually actively litigating the rights of the City of Huntington Beach in that dissolution. Us, like all other cities, have not been very successful because the governor decided that redevelopment was over. We're not getting a lot of cooperation out of the state organizations in trying to retain those benefits and retain those dollars for the city. But that is something that I'm actively participating in, is to make sure the dollars that are earned in the city stay in the city as opposed to being distributed to the schools and the other counties. Huntington Beach is known as a donor city. We contribute far more to the county pot than we ever receive. So we are always diligently working to make sure the tax dollars stay here. And to the extent we can have those dollars come back via sales tax, the internet tax, utility tax, all of those issues, we are constantly in battle with the state to retain those monies and to gain more monies.
Although I don't think there's much debate or controversy about Ms. McGrath's answer. I think you know, a lot of these things, unlike a council candidate debate where there's different perspectives on policy, a lot of these answers are just a matter of law. And so I don't think in this instance there's a whole lot of debate. One of the things that is unique about the type of city that we have, a charter city, is that it grants the city a certain level of autonomy and responsibility. Obviously, our counties are arms of the state, but cities have a certain level of autonomy. And one of the things that can be created, like as suggested in the question, is some tension between local government and either county or state level governments, and even the federal government to some extent. And it's important for the city, I think, to know what their limitations are and what their responsibilities are. One of the things that comes to mind with regard to the city is, I don't know if anybody recalls the wet electric event that occurred down here on State Beach about a year ago. The wet electric event was on state property, and it was, the permits were pulled by the promoters through Sacramento, the state of California. And rightfully so, because it was on state property. But one of the issues for the city was, how does the city of Huntington Beach on city property handle the spillover effect or some of the collateral issues that are incident to a very large, I think they were expecting 15,000 people to attend, event down on State Beach. And it's important for the city to be on their toes and to know what's going on well in advance. And unfortunately, I think for the city of Huntington Beach at the time, we were caught off guard. In essence, the city council was made aware, or I've heard they were made aware, about 3 weeks before the actual event was to occur. Well, I think if the city had done its job properly and checked in with the county and the state on a regular basis to know what permits are being pulled, that we would have had an opportunity to know well in advance what is going on with that event, whether alcohol or not, no matter, whatever, how many people are going to be there, how many vendors are going to be there, what types of issues is the city going to have to deal with when the event actually occurs. And in that case, we didn't know, and it was somewhat too late, so to speak. The permits were pulled in April of 2013, I believe, and the event was to occur in, I think it was late July or early August of 2013. And our city found out, so they say, 3 weeks before the event occurred. And that's, some of the things that can occur between, issues that happen that are permitted at the state level and can happen at the local level. And it's important for us, I think, the city manager, but also the city attorney, to be on our toes and to be making inquiries both at the county and state level to find out what's going on. Some of the other issues that may draw some tension between local and higher level governments are things like even ordinances. Some of the ordinances that we pass and approve are, I would argue are unconstitutional. And I think it's incumbent upon the city attorney in instances like the social host ordinance, instances like the fireworks ban, the most recent fireworks ban, and in instances like keeping the predators out of the park. I think it's important, it's incumbent upon the city attorney to be advising the council actively on how do we solve problems without violating the Constitution. And as we saw with the fireworks ban, that the second portion was withdrawn. Councilwoman Hardy rightfully acknowledged during a council meeting that provision crossed the line. It was probably unenforceable, it was probably illegal, and it was an overreach by the city government. That's what you need a city attorney for. When the council goes to the city attorney and says, hey, we would like an ordinance, we want it to achieve these objectives, the city attorney is to go to the drawing board, do the research, try to draft an ordinance that achieves those objectives. Not simply go to the drawing board and put together an ordinance that gives the council everything that they're asking for, because there are tensions and potential conflicts with the county, like the predators out of the park, and even the federal government with the Constitution on private property rights and individual liberties, things like that. So it's important, I think, for our local government to constantly be mindful of its responsibilities, to constantly be on watch and on guard for issues that may come up, and to be responsible about them. And for the city attorney to be proactive and to guide the council on what our limitations are with what we're trying to do to achieve our objectives. Thank you.
Assume that you are working on an issue that the City Council does not fully agree on. How will you respond if an individual council member approaches you regarding that issue for some information or advice without the express support of his or her fellow council member?
The city attorney's duty and responsibility is to the city. The city attorney's duty and responsibility is not to any particular member of the council. What the city attorney's job is to do is to advise the council on what is legal or illegal, what is permissible or not permissible under the law. The city attorney is not there to be a tool for a council member or a couple council members to try to get something accomplished. The council are not lobbyists for the city attorney or toward the city attorney. The council's there to make laws, to make policy, but within the boundaries of the law. And I think, it's extremely important, like I mentioned earlier with my last response, that the city attorney have a strong position on things like ordinances when the council wants to go too far. And it's important also for the city attorney to be available and willing to work with the police, for instance, other departments, when perhaps certain things may not be popular with the council. I know the police department, for instance, would certainly like to have some tools made available to them to help fight the downtown public drunkenness problem. That's a big problem. It's a huge problem. I hear about it all the time. And yet we say, why aren't the police doing their jobs? Or why aren't the bars shutting down early? Well, the police would like more tools, i.e. more laws, local laws, perhaps civil citations or other mechanisms by which the downtown could be controlled more through law enforcement. if we had those tools made available, and that squarely falls within the purview of the city attorney, and to work with the city council to make those tools available. That goes also for, marijuana dispensary crackdowns. I know the police are working hard to keep, these issues under control. The city attorney is in a prime position to be there to back up law enforcement. I read an article just a week ago in San Bernardino when the medical marijuana dispensaries when the city was cracking down on them, it was the police and the city attorney that went in, cracked down on them, and prosecuted them. And no matter what side of the issue you're on, some people may be in favor of marijuana, some may not. The issue is, what are the city attorney's duties and responsibilities? And when law enforcement needs to act, the city attorney needs to be there with full support, whether it's popular with the city council or not. And so all of these things, work together to accomplish a goal. But I think at this point, there are still some needs in the community that can be met with the right kind of leadership in the city attorney's office. Thank you.
Interesting position to be put in relative to if the city council is feeling that they're going to do one thing, and that's come from a city council meeting. It's very different than if it's coming through the process. My duty is to the client as a whole, which is all 7, but every single council member has questions and wants inquiries as to how they can accomplish something. My job is really to facilitate what implementation and policies that the council wants. It's not my job to lead them. It's not my job to tell them and then expect them to listen to me. If any of you have ever hired an attorney, you know that you can also ignore your attorney. And that has happened. In this particular example, medical marijuana, the city attorney's office was the lead on the injunctions that shut down Sunset Beach. We're also currently shutting down the one that's over on Slater Avenue. The problem with medical marijuana dispensaries, again, I agree with my opponent, whether you agree that medical marijuana should be legal or not, it's currently illegal in the city of Huntington Beach. But ironically, most people don't complain. The only people that are going to complain about a medical marijuana dispensary are the people that want them to stay. So it's not a law that's easily enforced. The police department has the tools to do so and has done so. Code enforcement has got involved as well. In the respect to some of the other comments that were made, the tools for the police department, the tools for code enforcement, the tools for the city of Huntington Beach to accomplish its objectives start with the city council and not with the city attorney's office. I have provided those tools. I've been police legal advisor. I've been code enforcement attorney. I've actively pursued nuisances in the community. Recently, I mentioned a messy professor over in the harbor back in the 90s where her house was actually lost in foreclosure because she was a hoarder, as they call them now. We didn't have that word back then. But the role for the city attorney is really not to be the dictator, but the implementer. We facilitate the decisions that the council members that you have elected have decided what's important, regardless of how we feel. On the sex offender ordinance, I did advise that it was unconstitutional on the record. And for the council members that adopted it, it was more important to take that stand. And eventually, those same council members had to repeal that ordinance because the Ninth Circuit did confirm that it was unconstitutional. Regarding other ordinances, including what happened with Wet Electric, I stand on my record. I've done this job for 12 years. I don't believe my opponent's ever written an ordinance, ever researched an ordinance, and I've been doing it for 20. Thank you.
Based on your knowledge of Huntington Beach, what do you see as the biggest legal challenges facing our city? And how does your background prepare you to meet them?
Well, most of our legal challenges actually come up on their own. I don't look for them or create them. I just inherit the facts. We are going to have legal challenges relative to development. I think the Beach Edge Corridor Specific Plan is going to trigger some litigation just because of the intensity of the use and the time that it takes. We are definitely going to be involved and embroiled in litigation regarding the massage establishments. We went from 29 to 81 massage establishments while the state decided that they knew how to regulate massage better than the city of Huntington Beach. And so when resources permit, we're actively trying to take care of the massage establishments. Most of them, I'm sure, as you well know, are illicit. And back in the day when I enforced it, it was more of probably a prostitution problem and doesn't have that much emphasis because typically if you're a victim of prostitution, you also participated in prostitution. Not that it's right, just that it doesn't have the same level of enforcement issues. However, now the problem is human trafficking. And if we go into a massage establishment and the officers are successful in arresting the particular masseuses at that time, Within 30 days, there's 3 new masseuses coming from Garden Grove, coming from Santa Ana, coming from Anaheim. It is a huge problem that the city of Huntington Beach is only going to be able to take care of a teaspoon for what we can do. But again, it's resource allocation. And we can't take care of the downtown with 50 officers on a holiday and also be able to go take care of the massage establishments. That's the job of Chief Handy, to determine where those resources should be allocated. He has also, well, Chief Small before him, has suffered with a reduction in staffing, has to decide where to put that staff. Chief Small, when he started in 2003, determined that it needed to be on patrol, that the citizens of Huntington Beach needed to see officers on the streets. And it was a very effective tool for several years. Now the emphasis is the downtown area. So from that perspective, I anticipate we will be enforcing, through injunctions primarily, the restrictions on downtown bars, downtown establishments. There's 12 bars downtown that stay open past midnight, but they cause all of the problems that we hear. Downtown from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. is a great place to be. I live downtown. I frequent it between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m., but between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., it doesn't belong to the city of Huntington Beach. It doesn't even belong to the people that are visiting Huntington Beach. We've become a mecca for people to come to because of the proximity of the locations. So over time, because the laws don't permit us to change it quickly, we will have to make a difference downtown and improve the environment and improve our reputation, because it's enough. Every time we say that the downtown is dangerous and there's too many bars and it's a problem, is another visitor that's going to Newport instead of Huntington. And we rely so much on that sales tax and on that TOT. Thank you.
Again, I don't think this is very controversial. I largely agree with Ms. McGrath. Just to add to that, I think some of the legal challenges, some of the challenges that lie ahead for Huntington Beach is, the level of development that's going on right now and the level of business activity. As I said earlier, I've been in Huntington Beach since 1982, and it seems like it's on a huge curve upward in terms of business and development, which is a good thing. I think it's fantastic for the city. I think the businesses are obviously the engine that keeps our economy going. One of the things I think that is an issue for the city attorney's office, and I think it really can very easily be solved, is the problem of, how do we get these businesses going? There's a lot of policy that's put in place by the city council to make Huntington Beach a more business-friendly environment. And some argue that more recently it's been less business-friendly. I think, though, that there's a lot that can be done with the city attorney's office. For those, I've been out on the campaign trail now for over a year, frankly, and I've met with a lot of people, met with a lot of citizens, I've met with a lot of businesses. And I can tell you that businesses, their number one complaint is that my business permit or my building permit or my lease or my contract or my memorandum of understanding is not getting done. And I think the city attorney's office, while there are a lot of other challenges that the city attorney's faced with in the city, I think one of the areas that can be improved rather quickly is for the city attorney to make higher priority of getting business permits and lease reviews and contract renewals and all these things done much more quickly so that businesses can open up on time, as they should, so that businesses can continue to expand their business, to conduct business, and to bring in revenue for the city. I think right now, what I'm hearing out there is that, yeah, there's maybe, policy that's not business friendly, but I'm also hearing that, I've had a lot of difficulty working with the city attorney's office, getting my permits approved or getting whatever legal reviews associated with any business that has to go through this city. There are a lot of complaints. And I think it would be important for the city attorney's office, I think it will be one of my priorities, to make sure that whatever legal reviews come through my office, that they're done with the highest priority. We want to put businesses to work. We want to get entrepreneurs up on their feet. Whatever it takes that the city attorney's office can do, we want to make sure that we're doing and we make it the highest priority possible. And not to view business with indifference or a lower priority. We want to make businesses the highest priority, those who apply and want to get things done through the city. Thank you.
Michael, you'll be first up this time. Please explain the ideal relationship between the city attorney, the city manager, city staff, and the city council, and how your experience will ensure that this relationship functions properly.
The relationship between, well, like I think Ms. McGrath and I have already said, the city attorney is, in essence, responsible to be legal counsel for the city. The city attorney does not have a duty or responsibility to any one council member. City attorney does not have a duty or responsibility just to the city manager. The city attorney has a duty and responsibility to the city, which is like a corporation. And the face of the corporation is the city council in this case. And so, you know, when the council passes an ordinance or makes a decision, it's up to the city attorney and the city manager to implement those types of decisions. It's also important, however, for the city attorney to advise the council, as I alluded to earlier, and to, you know, work closely with the city manager and the city staff to make sure that everything is you know, up to par, passes muster, and that to make sure that the city doesn't get in trouble. You know, for instance, people may be familiar with the T-Mobile versus Huntington Beach litigation. Well, in that instance, the permits for those developments were put on the consent calendar and they were granted. Permits were issued and development began. And you know, I've talked to a lot of the council and I've read the record. What wasn't done in that instance was making sure that environmental impact reports were done and making sure that a Measure C analysis was done. Because had a Measure C analysis been done, then it would have been determined that these developments exceeded the $100,000 threshold and would have necessarily had gone to the ballot. So, and now we're embroiled 4 years of litigation. Had, I believe, the city attorney stepped up and said, hey, council, we just can't show up on the consent calendar. It needs to be vetted properly before it's approved. We wouldn't be mired in this litigation. These are the kinds of things that when you have an attorney available to the council and available to the city manager, these are the kinds of issues that can be averted. Another one is guiding council on ordinances, you know, making sure that ordinances aren't overreaching and violate individual liberties. Thank you.
Okay.
The ideal relationship between the city attorney, the city manager, the department heads, and city council is really a relationship where you can accomplish the objectives set forth by the city council. I agree with Mr. Gates that they are the face of the city. They've been elected by the people to determine what those policies are, but the city attorney is separately elected specifically to make sure that the decisions they make don't waste taxpayer money in needless litigation or in needless settlements or judgments. And that's what my office does. Furthermore, unlike other elected city attorneys that I hear rumors of, because there's only 11 of us in the state, although there's over 50% of the city or state of California is represented by an elected city attorney, is that I do work with the city manager, I do work with the department heads, because what's important to me is the right thing be done for the city. It's not about whether the city attorney is right, it's not about the city manager being right, it's not about the different departments being right. I am a manager, I am in the department head team, we meet regularly, and I am part of making the decisions, not just from the management and of the legal operation of the city, but also of how do we implement what we do, and how do we do it in not only a legal way, because that's only one part of the inquiry. There's also what makes sense, what's right for the city, and what will people understand. Frequently, the city does things that we're not good at explaining. And all of a sudden, as I think some of you may have influenced or experienced, we've changed our RV ordinance again. And nobody knew, nobody complained, nobody said anything until about 2 weeks ago when the police department sent out a courtesy notice to those individuals that need RV permits. And all of a sudden, everything went crazy. I think, honestly, Chief Hannity handled it well. He didn't start enforcing, he started giving notice. And unfortunately, it's now that people are concerned after the fact. So the job we have now is to balance how do we deal with those complaints, how do we handle that so that it doesn't impact the citizens to that extent. As for T-Mobile, I find it intriguing that several times today that my opponent has told us how things went in the office. Speaking candidly, I was there and he was not. The reason why there was no Measure C analysis of T-Mobile is because T-Mobile told us it was $65,000 to put in that tower. That's what on the billing permit, that's all the information that city received. The only time we found out it exceeded $65,000 and required a Measure C vote was when he told them to stop. We terminated their license agreement, and then they wanted us to pay them back for what they spent. And that inquiry came through Councilmember Bohr at the time. They wanted $250,000 to be made whole. That's when Measure C was triggered. So it wasn't a lack of analysis by the city attorney's office. I take umbrage at that, actually. And I really expect right now that my opponent thinks that in every department I can be in every place. I have to rely on staff just like you have to rely on staff. It's a city of 950 employees. The department heads make the decisions when to ask the legal question, and quite honestly, when not to ask the legal question. Frequently, they know the answer they'll get is not what they want. They're hoping they can do what they want and beg permission later. So the reason I think that I'm uniquely qualified is I've been doing it. I have those relationships. I've had those relationships for 20 years. I am the second senior department head in the city of Huntington Beach. The only person that's been there longer is our planning director, and he's been there 10 years longer than I, so I can't even begin to compare. But I've been through 3 city managers, and I couldn't even tell you how many council members that I've served. But I am proud of the fact that several of those council members are endorsing me for office. They actually know what I do. They've been with me, they've experienced what I do, and think that I do a good job. Thank you.
This time it will be Jennifer. You're up first, okay? It can sometimes be difficult to see the line between legal and policy issues. Where do you draw the line between policy issues that must be decided by the City Council and legal issues that you believe should be considered as part of the policy decision?
I like that question because it comes up in the office quite frequently. Over the time that I've been at City Hall, I've had to determine when I can give advice and how I can put it in a way that people understand that I might be giving them legal advice, and when the legal advice ends, anything after that is, what's a good idea? Being part of City Hall, whether I was city attorney, deputy city attorney, or just being part of the environment, you kind of get a feel for the community. You get a feel for what works and what doesn't work. So what I instruct my attorneys to do actually is give the legal advice. You can do this, but it may not be such a good idea. It's legal, and some of you might have experienced that legal still doesn't make it a good idea. But here's other alternatives. The mantra for my advisory staff, of which I have 3, and their job is to make the job of everybody else at City Hall work smoothly, because I kind of have a thing for wanting to win, so we try and be part of the solution before we have the litigation. And that's what the answer is when someone comes to you and says, can I do this? The answer is usually no, but you can do this, and you try and find that solution. And so for me, it's really a demarcation, and I say it frequently for the people that work with me daily, that it's not a legal question, it's a policy question. And where you draw the line is quite simple. If it's not based on statute, based on case law, then you really have only your gut and your ethics and your policy decisions that are left. And that is really for council. Sometimes they don't like that. I've been several times put in a position that if I could just say one more thing that was legally even part of the issue, then they could vote a different way. So I have had to withstand not being the 8th council member when it works for the particular council that's trying to achieve their objective. Thank you.
Again, I think that response is a good response. I would only add that a couple things. One is the timing, I think, of the legal advice or the legal guidance is important. I don't know if everybody followed the recent fireworks ban. That had been going on for 6 or 8 weeks, from first talk to resolution, and it was finally decided that the enforcement portion of it went too far, and it went too far on the basis that it was essentially would be probably deemed unconstitutional. But we had gone weeks. That was the second reading. We had gone weeks and weeks on that ordinance, for example, when it should have been advised earlier that this enforcement provision is probably too strong and overreaching. The council needs legal guidance, and they may ultimately get it, but I believe that it would help the process, it would help council, it would help the police department, it would help fire, it would help all the departments, all the aspects of the city if they got it much sooner and they got more definitive answers about where the legal boundaries are. And I think we can find instances of that everywhere. The social host ordinance is another one. The keeping the predators out of the park is another ordinance. So it's not that the attorney is advising council on policy, it's taking a proposal from council and trying to come back with a legal response or a legal analysis much, much quicker so we could save time and energy and effort and public angst debating over, for instance, the fireworks ordinance enforcement provision. There were a lot of public comments on these types of ordinances that in the end were far different than they were. And they were different on a legal basis. I don't think we need counsel from the public or counsel from the fire chief to say, hey, this is unconstitutional, or this just may go a step too far. I think it's important that the city attorney be responsive early, be assertive, and offer the proper guidance, as any attorney would do to any client in the private sector.
So I've got room for one last little question here. And Michael, you'll be up on this one.
Is this question 4 or 5?
This is question 6. How are the lights?
They're great.
Okay. We talk a lot today about the interactions and the relationships between the city attorney's office, the city manager, city council, etc. But I'm just curious to hear just a response to some thoughts about what do you feel is the role between the city attorney's office and the business community itself?
I think I've already made some comments on this earlier. I think the city attorney obviously has their duties to the city, but it also has its own responsibilities when it comes to what crosses its desk. And as I believe Ms. McGrath would agree with, there are a lot of issues with the city that go through the city attorney's office, including defending the city from litigation, excuse me, reviewing and drafting, ordinances, doing legal research and things like that. There are a whole host of business-related requests, legal reviews that go through the city attorney's office. And I think, like the city attorney being responsive to council or being responsive to other departments, I think having a city attorney that's responsive to the business community is extremely important. And it's not taking a policy issue. That work is on the city attorney's desk, period. That work is in the inbox of the city attorney, period. It's incumbent upon the city attorney to get those legal reviews done and that paperwork processed. And I think that currently, I don't know if I've come across a single business person in Huntington Beach who says, I had a great experience. Every single business person, entrepreneur, realtor, whomever that I've talked to in the city have said, yeah, I thought they told me I was gonna get a permit in 6 weeks or 6 months. And I had my grand opening set up for 6 weeks or 6 months. And then it was delayed. And so I couldn't open my shop. So there are, a number of issues with the business community. And it's not about policy. It's about these reviews are on my desk anyway. Let me process them a lot faster. I've heard stories from the planning department. There's business development going on in the planning department. The planning department goes up to the city attorney's office, takes a single-page memo up to the city attorney's office with, CC&Rs or some other, legalese, and all they need is approval. And if they got a signature from the city attorney's office, they could move forward with the project down in the planning department. And the city attorney's office won't sign off on it right away. They take it, and what appears to be sitting on it for 6 or 8 or many, many weeks. And it slows down business. It slows down the planning department. The language presented in the instance I'm thinking of wasn't even controversial. That came out of the city attorney's file. That was cut and paste legalese. That could have easily been processed the same day. Another instance, I've coached and managed Little League teams for 10 years. Our Ocean View Little League, every year we have to get, because it's part of its city property, we have to get the insurance policy renewed. Well, requires another legal review. So the new policy goes to the city attorney's office to get signed off on. Well, instead of just getting the same policy that we used last year signed off on this year, just with a different date, it gets caught up in the city attorney's office for 4 months. And that's Ocean View Little League. I know from firsthand experience, just getting an insurance policy renewed takes 4 months. I mean, this is shocking to me, and I can understand the frustration of the business community and other organizations in the city that try to get anything done. I know that grants, those types of things that require legal review, are slowed down. All of these things, ladies and gentlemen, need to be made a higher priority. We need to allow nonprofits, for-profits, any profits, little leagues, we need to get all these people working and make them a high priority in Huntington Beach. Thank you.
I'm just collecting my thoughts because Mr. Gates has lots of opinions about what happens in the city attorney's office, but has no facts. Building permits do not go through the city attorney's office. Business licenses do not go through the city attorney's office. If you submit insurance that's accurate, it goes through risk management and it's turned around within 24 hours. If you had an experience where it was delayed for 4 months, that's because something was wrong with the insurance and it was delayed in risk management. So I'm not going to own everything that goes wrong at City Hall. The fact that something gets slowed down, I'm sorry, whether it's good or bad, that's government. And that's a complaint you have towards City Council, that's a complaint you have in general. But the City Attorney's Office is not the stopping gap for business going forward. The other issue that came up was CC&Rs. Again, I'm just going to defer to the fact that I have the facts. They're all available for you. Mr. Gates has requested records. They're all available for you. My record speaks for itself. Our turnaround time is 95% of the time within the time that it's promised. I work for 10 separate departments. So therefore, in order to get something through, it does take prioritization. And it's not just litigation. It's not just planning. It's not police. Actually, City Council dictates what the priority is. So the fact that we may not be business friendly at the City of Huntington Beach, although I may disagree personally, because I've been there long enough to know how bad we've been in the past, I do think we're better. I hope you guys think we're better, or at least we're working on it. But it is a cohesive team effort at the city. Everything is a priority to everyone, as I'm sure if any of you have worked with a multifaceted organization. In addition, it also requires there to be communication. However, there are no business permits, business licenses, CUPs, or EIRs that are staying in the city attorney's office. Personally, I'd rather move them quickly so they get back to the people that can make them happen. Thank you.
All right. You both
Are you
did
going
very,
for 7?
No, I'm not going for 7. You both did very well answering the questions. Seriously, let's give them a round of applause. Jennifer, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Much of what I would say in a closing statement has been said throughout my answers to the questions. I do want to speak to the issue of most of the day, or most of this hour, has been spent with me trying to battle the allegations of my opponent who's heard it, who's thought it, who's been complained to. I can appreciate all of that. I also receive those directly in my office and have to deal with complaints from the public on a regular basis, whether or not they're justified. But I do want to refer you back to, I've got the documentation, I can establish my record, I can establish the responsiveness of my attorneys, I can establish the record of the litigators that work for me, I can establish why it is that I work with City Council directly, I make sure that my relationship with the city manager is solid, and the reason for that, although elected and a separate check and balance on the City Council's behaviors and making sure they do things legally, they won't listen to me if they don't trust me. They won't listen to me if they don't know that I'm giving neutral advice, that I don't have any skin in the game, that my opinion doesn't matter. In fact, I can tell you several ordinances that I've written that I didn't agree with. But I was reacting and responding to the requests of either the department heads who wanted something to enforce or responding to the City Council. That is the role of the city attorney, is to make things happen that will enhance the benefits for the city of Huntington Beach. It's not to dictate what those policies are, although we may have a good opinion, but it's not to dictate what the departments do, it's not to dictate what the City Council does. It's to take what the City Council wants to happen and put it together in a package so that it's legally defensible and obviously something that can be implemented that will, in my opinion, work to the benefit of the city of Huntington Beach. I hope that you will vote for me. I do believe that I can continue to do the job I've been doing for 12 years. And I'm confident that I have the municipal law experience to do my job. My opponent does not. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, again, I'd like to thank the Chamber, and I would like to thank Ms. McGrath for this spirited debate. You know, I've been accused of leveling allegations with no facts. I didn't want to have to do this, but I do have a number of facts with me. One of the reasons I decided to run for city attorney is because I believe, as a longtime resident of Huntington Beach, that the status quo just isn't good enough. You know, we hear from my opponent that, well, it's just government. It's government. You know, get used to it. It's government. You know what? I've seen so much success in the private sector. I'm not willing to accept that, and that's what's caused me to run for city attorney. I'm a defense attorney. I'm a trial attorney. I know that the city handles about 40 to 45 cases a year. I handle 40 to 45 cases a year all by myself, with some other attorneys that work with me on my cases. I have six associates that work with me on my cases. I've handled hundreds of cases. I've tried a number of cases. I got 3 defense verdicts last year. I've got 3 more trials before this year ends. I'm trial prepping right now for a September 4th trial. I know what it takes to defend the city, and I've seen the fruits of my labor. And I'm asking for the opportunity to do that for the city. Because for me, its government is not a good response. For me, the status quo is not enough. I have seen the successes that can be had by working hard, defending aggressively. You know, one of the issues that I have is the settlements. You know, I know my opponent doesn't like this, but in the legal community outside of Huntington Beach is known as Settlement City, and there's a reason for that. Because for, you know, the years under Ms. McGrath and maybe some years under Gail Hutton, her predecessor, we have a settlement approach. We have a settlement philosophy toward litigation. Now, Ms. McGrath did cite a couple victories recently, and that's fantastic for the city. But I don't think we should be satisfied, ladies and gentlemen, with a couple victories during an election year. I think we need to have these victories on a regular basis every single year, no matter what, election or not. And I have the facts. You know, in addition to spending $2.3 million maintaining the city attorney's office, we spend almost $1 million to outsource for other legal services, and over $1 million between 2003 and 2013 on settlements and judgments. We're throwing in the towel far too often on litigation, and I know that because I've done it. I don't settle cases like this. Excessive force cases against the police department. There have been 13 excessive force, false arrest, or other force-related cases that we've settled or paid on. We're talking $70,000, $90,000. I have the list right here. Having represented the Orange County Sheriff's Department, I can't remember the last time I paid. I don't think I've ever paid on an excessive force case. I know it can be done. And Neil Moore proved it. I want these victories on a regular basis every year to save the taxpayers a ton of money. You know, the city attorney's office also, you know, this goes to what can it do for businesses, but what can it do for the community? It needs to be far more responsive to the community. I know for a fact, Ocean View School District workers, board members, employees are supporting me in droves because they believe that the city attorney's office was not responsive to their needs. Case in point. Ocean View School District versus Rainbow Disposal. There was a conflict between Ocean View School District and Rainbow Disposal. Ocean View School District attempted to try to work it out informally with the city. And board members tell me that the city attorneys was deaf to their needs, deaf to their responses. So as a last resort, they filed a lawsuit against Rainbow Disposal. We can avoid litigation if we're responsive to the community. We can save taxpayers money if we aggressively defend. You know, my opponent also relies on this audit. I actually have the audit. Does anybody wonder why a day-to-day operations and management audit was even done in the first place? Because the city council was losing confidence that the city attorney was getting their job done. That's why it was done in the first place. And this is not a glowing report, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, there are some accolades, but we're compared to a few other cities like Chula Vista and San Bernardino. Chula Vista, I would hope that we're better than Chula Vista, and I think San Bernardino went out of business. Or I'm sorry, filed bankruptcy, essentially going out of business. We're better than San Bernardino, we're better than Chula Vista. And then in 2012, when the city council attempted to outsource her office, it wasn't just her staff to save money, it was her as well. And the reason it didn't go through is because council boardmen at the time objected because the charter required the city attorney to maintain her job as an elected official. If it wasn't meant to outsource her office as well, or her position as well, that wouldn't have been an objection and that wouldn't have been an issue. There are problems with the city attorney's office. They don't do all bad, but I'd like a lot more victories. You know, I think it's important that we work hard at the city attorney's office. You know, one of the issues cited in the report on page 31 is that the city attorney was frequently unavailable. And ladies and gentlemen, I promise you as the city attorney, I'm going to be available. I will work hard. I'm frequently at my desk at 5:30 in the morning as it stands right now, and I work 12-hour days. I am going to do that for the city of Huntington Beach. I'm going to put the time in. I'm going to be there when the phone rings. I'm going to work with the other attorneys to ensure that we're defending the city aggressively. I'm going to be there, put in the hard work, and get it done. I think the status quo hasn't been good for us. And that's the only reason I've decided to run. You know, I'm endorsed by a number of attorneys. I believe my last count was over 16 attorneys. I'm endorsed by Tony Rakakis, who is the county's top cop. And I'm endorsed by other city attorneys, including Pat Munoz. And I see that my time is up, so I will stop. But I want to thank you again. I would appreciate your vote, and I think we need a change. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
And while we're talking about votes, the most important thing I can tell you at the end of the day is that after all of due diligence that you do to make very, very sure that when those ballots come out or you walk on into the voting booth on November 4th, that you do indeed vote. Take the time, take the energy. It's that important. This particular office is critical to the success of this community, so I urge you all to do exactly that. So before we say goodbye, though, we need to say once again a thank you to the Hilton, their staff. I just can't say enough about the Hilton property and their management team, and of course RJ Mayer. Huge supporters of business here in town. Obviously they interact well with business because we do a lot of things here at the hotel, but just a wonderful, wonderful organization to work with.